Okay, everyone. A big Shabbat Shalom to all of you. Welcome to the river. Whether you are watching us now on the live stream or whether you are watching after the fact on the recording, we pray that you are blessed and that the Father and His hand is over you and your lives. If you are watching after the fact and you do wish to come join us live on the live streams and be a part of what the Father is doing in our midst, we do gather every weekly Shabbat at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That is our anchor in the ground. And if you are wondering how to come and join us live, head over to riverbranchfellowship.com, scroll down on the main homepage, and you'll see a link to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which when you click will bring up this box where you can type in your first, last name and your email and hit subscribe. And that will put you on our weekly newsletter. And every Friday you'll receive said weekly newsletter, which will contain the Zoom login details to be able to come and join us. We would love for you to come and say hi and be a part of what the Father's doing in our midst and just experience a slightly more intimate fellowship by joining part of the live stream and just meeting like-minded believers in the faith. Okay, we are continuing through our journey on this series that's been titled The Heavenly Census. Some of you may be thinking, Michael, when is the Heavenly Census part coming? Oh, it's coming. But we have to lay a lot of groundwork to be able to even get there. And today, I mean, this is the fourth installment, if you wish, in this Heavenly Census series. I mentioned last week that we're going to start looking at what the writers of the Brit Hadashah, what we would call the New Testament, how they understood these things. And as I was putting the teaching together, I realized we've got to make one more pit stop before we head on over to the end of the book, so to speak. I don't know about you, but who here has noticed that the plan of redemption is extremely deep and multifaceted? There's so much going on. It's so rich. And we are just pulling a thread regarding this heavenly census. But in doing so, I think I hope people are starting to appreciate just truly how rich and deep our faith is, because things that we read of in the apostolic writings, the people of the time had a very deep, rich understanding of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And they were weaving all these things together into a much greater understanding. It's amazing how much people miss of what's actually written in the Torah writings and prophets and how it feeds directly into what we would call the New Testament. And I hope people are really beginning to see that certain key tenets to our faith that are found in the New Testament are actually very deep, much deeper than we could have anticipated when we have a proper understanding of what's being given to us in the foundation of the faith and in the front of the book. Today, we're going to look at redemption and vengeance. Redemption is a key part of the faith. The redemption from sin, the redemption from our fallen state. And many people don't realize that actually there's a very solid understanding of how this redemption would occur and what are the parameters as given to us, especially in the Torah, regarding redemption. Many of you will be aware that nothing that is said in the end of the book doesn't have a foundation in the front of the book. And so today, again, I hope people are starting to, as we've gone through the series, because so far in the series, we've actually been very much rooted in the Torah and the prophets and the writings. But I'm hoping people are, as we're going through this journey, are starting to hear things of, oh, this is what the Apostle Paul was on about, or this is what Peter was on about, or this is what Yeshua was truly referencing when he was making these statements in the Gospels. Today is going to be, again, very much in that vein, that you should be hearing echoes of what's been written in what we would call the New Testament. But before we jump in to today's message, let's very quickly recap what we covered last week. I realized that we could do a whole teaching just on the recaps of every part of the series that we've done, because again, there's so many things that all coalesce together to form this beautiful picture, or that, you know, that we can see a part of the Father's plan of redemption. We were looking at who is he yesterday, this question, man hu, that was in the Hebrew, that was very first asked at the giving of the manna. There's bread from heaven, and this statement, man hu, who is he, what is it? And we answered the question, what shall be his name? And we saw that one of his names, of one of our Messiah's names, will be Wonder. The wondrous works that Elohim has wrought and that he continues to fashion. And so we see this name of wonder. His name shall be Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father. And that this word goes right throughout the prophecies regarding this word that we've been using as a springboard for the series, the word counting. Safar in the Hebrew, which can also mean to recount, to proclaim. Remember, this is all about the proclamation that will go forth with the giving of the good news following the fulfillment of the spring appointed times almost 2,000 years ago. We saw how Messiah's name actually had to be Yeshua. The name wasn't just plucked out of thin air. And the reason is due to the Tanakh prophecies, especially in the book of Isaiah and in the book of Psalms, that when you look at the Hebrew, it says, Yah will become Yeshua unto me. In the English, we read it as Yah will become my salvation. But when you dig into the Hebrew, it's a very literal statement that Yah will become Yeshua unto me. And this statement is written in the Song of Moses, it's written in the book of Isaiah, it's written in the Psalms. And so when you look at it in a literal sense, this is why Messiah's name had to be Yeshua. He is the salvation, the deliverance, the Yeshua of Elohim. He is how Elohim will bring about his desire here on earth as it is in heaven. We saw that Messiah will sit on the throne of David as per the promises to the covenant with Abraham and David. We saw that the covenant with Abraham is that you will be the father of many nations, and to your seed I will give these things, and your seed will be as numerous as the stars of heaven and as the sand on the seashore. And as part of that covenant, Yah saying, someone from the line of David is going to rule over my house. His name shall be Yeshua, his name shall be Wonder. We saw that the wonders that Elohim has wrought will be proclaimed to a generation yet to come and to a seed not yet born. Again, this proclaimed is this word that we've been using as a springboard, safar, to count, to recount, to proclaim, and that this is intrinsically linked to the giving of the good news, the gospel as we would know it, and that this seed that is yet to be born, I believe, is actually ultimately pointing to the millennial reign. But as we're going to see as we progress through next week's teaching, that it can also refer to those that would have the faith of Abraham and thus be grafted into the house of Israel, thus becoming the seed of Abraham and the seed of Messiah through faith. Elohim's wonders. We saw that there were some main themes that kept cropping up in the prophecies regarding Elohim's wonders, and wonder being one of the names of Messiah. We saw that Yah's coming to the earth and sitting on his throne in righteous judgment, thus fulfilling the fall appointed times, is a key tenet of Yah's wonders here on earth. Another point we saw was the resurrection and the liberation of the captives, those that are bound by sin and death, and themes of resurrection. And we'll delve into this more today regarding redemption. We also saw that one of Elohim's wonders was Yah becoming Yeshua unto us. This statement, Yah will become my salvation. He will become Yeshua unto me. We also had a dive into the role of the suffering servant. And we saw that part of the suffering servant, one of the things he would do is that he would take on the seed of men. He would become a man. And so in Yah becoming Yeshua unto us, he takes on the seed of men, which should give echoes of the book of Hebrews, actually. We saw that the suffering servant will do many things, especially when we looked at Isaiah's prophecies, especially around Isaiah 52, 53, that he will sprinkle many nations. And this language, this is actually priestly language of atonement, especially regarding the forgiveness of sins. He will regather the scattered house, the suffering servant, which is why we saw that one of the prophecies of the suffering servant is that he will seemingly fail, but actually he will not. He will, and this would speak to Messiah's death and resurrection. We saw that the suffering servant will see a seed through his suffering. Through his sufferings, through his death, and ultimately his glorification, that the suffering servant will see a seed. And this will play a big part into what we'll cover next week when we look at the apostolic writings. We saw that the suffering servant will make his soul an offering for guilt. And this is what the Hebrew says in Isaiah 53. The English says he will make his life an atonement, depending on your translation. But when you look at the Hebrew, it actually says he will make his soul an offering for guilt. And again, this is pointing to Messiah having to come in the flesh, that he would bear the iniquities of many and make them to be accounted for righteous through his suffering. We saw that the suffering servant will be numbered. This word numbered was the word safar, which we've been using as a springboard. But he will be numbered and reckoned amongst the transgressors, yet he will make intercession for them. And this is the thing that's very often missed, that the suffering servant, through his suffering and the work he's done, will actually inherit the firstborn blessing, and that this is a double portion. Remember, in ancient times, the firstborn would have the double portion. And we saw that the suffering servant will actually share his inheritance with his brothers. And so again, this is part of why Messiah had to come in the flesh. And this answers the question, or the understanding that Yeshua will be at the right hand of the Father. Why? Because he's the firstborn of all creation. Thus, he has the double portion inheritance, and he will be able to share this inheritance. This will play a key role into today's teaching, actually. The idea of Yah becoming Yeshua unto us, that in itself had some key themes attached to it. That we would not die, but live to recount his wonders. And again, this word recount, to proclaim, to safar his mighty deeds. And so this is a clear statement of resurrection, that we will not remain dead. The righteous walking through the gate of righteousness. This is the gate that Yah has done. I enter through the gates of righteousness. And this tying into Yeshua's statements of, I am the door. No one comes to the Father except through me. And this is how both houses of Israel, and we'll see next week, those that will be grafted in can actually become part of the household of Elohim. This one, the stone that the builders rejected, will become the chief cornerstone. This was directly linked to Yah becoming Yeshua unto us, and that this is a stumbling block to both to Judah, and Paul would say it's also folly to the nations. This idea of Elohim coming in the flesh would become a stumbling stone for many. We looked also at this statement of Hoshiana, Hosanna. You know, we think of Hosanna as a term of praise, and actually it's a statement of, when you look at it grammatically, this bring it about, it's causal, bring it about that we will be saved. It's essentially saying, Father, bring about your plan of redemption. Your will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. Save us. How does this salvation occur? And that Yah becoming Yeshua unto us, by Psalm 118, blessed is he who comes in the name of Yah, right? Yah will become Yeshua unto us. Whoops. We looked at the proclamation of the gospel. The proclamation of the gospel is not a New Testament concept, as we saw last week. It's heavily spoken of in the prophets. That what is the good news? Recounting, proclaiming his wondrous works, proclaiming wonder to not only the house, but also to the nations where the house has been scattered to. It's this proclamation and declaration of Yeshua, the salvation of our King. The proclamation that Yah will appear in glory. Well, how will he do that? How will we see Yah eye to eye? Well, if Yah comes through Messiah, beautiful stuff. Good news, the King is coming to judge the earth. We always think of judgment as a negative thing. Actually, it's also positive. It depends what side of the judgment you find yourself. It's good news that he will come with his reward and his recompense. We'll look at this a bit more today. The right arm of Yah will rule. We see as well that it's the right arm of Yah that will gather the lambs and gather the scattered house and gather the nations unto him, like a shepherd gathers his flock. And so again, the suffering servant being the firstborn, the right arm of Yah, this double portion inheritance. We saw that it's good news. The nations will see the Yeshua of Yah. The way the English translated it was they will see the salvation or deliverance of Yah. The Hebrew is very clear. They will see Yeshua. That is good news. And there's good news that Yah will redeem and comfort his people. How does Yah redeem his people? We'll delve into that today. Why does all this matter? Because almost 2,000 years ago, the spring appointed times were fulfilled. A message of good news, a gospel went out that was written of in the Torah, in the prophets, in the writings. And it's this good news that the apostles were proclaiming. And so here we are prophetically speaking right here on the eve, if you wish to call it, of the fall appointed times. What is the good news that is to be going forth? What is the proclamation? Do we know it? Do we understand it, that we may bear witness of it to a dark and dying world? Okay, let's jump into today. The Jubilee. Who here has noticed the parallels between the counting of the Omer and the Jubilee? In the counting of the Omer, which has been the springboard for this series, we see this count going on. 7 completed Sabbaths, 7 weeks, 49 days, and then the 50th day being Shavuot. So going back to the timeline, we'd see that from the first of the first fruits, going through to Shavuot, you would have a jubilee of weeks. Now, the jubilee is given to us in the Torah is a jubilee of years, right? 7 years forms a Shemitah cycle, as it's said in the Torah. And that every 7 years, you have a forgiveness of debts, right? But then you have 7 cycles of these things, 49 years, 7 Shemitah cycles, and then the 50th year is the Yovel in the Hebrew. There's Jubilee. And so it's no coincidence, this parallel. And so what I believe the scriptures are asking us to do is this counting of the Omer and this counting of the Jubilee years, there's something there to help us understand what the proclamation is. What is the good news? Okay. So in Leviticus 25, verses 8 through to 10, you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years. So now we're on a yearly version of the counting of the Omer, if you wish. 7 times 7 years, so that the time of 7 weeks of years shall give you 49 years. Then you shall sound the loud trumpet on the 10th day of the 7th month. On the day of atonement, you shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land. So it's making it very clear that the culmination, as it were, of the Jubilees is to be proclaimed, it's to be announced, recounted on the Day of Atonement. Now, the Day of Atonement is part of the fall appointed times, which we are yet to wait and see. And as we saw in the previous part of the good news is essentially the fall appointed times are coming. Yah is coming to fulfill his fall appointed times. This is part of the proclamation going forth. You shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his clan. And so we see a few themes here with the jubilee. Liberty is being proclaimed. In the Hebrew, the word for liberty is deror, which means actually a flowing of myrrh, which is really interesting, but it also means freedom and liberty, okay? Now, so you proclaim freedom. What is this freedom pointing to? Now, we know that regarding the Jubilee, this was the liberation of bondservants and slaves, those that had sold themselves out of poverty, okay? We'll see this as we go through the scriptures. The word for Jubilee in the Hebrew is Yovel, the blast of a horn. Why? Because on the Jubilee, on the Day of Atonement, a horn was blown. The signal of the silver trumpets. Interesting. The instruments itself and the festival thus introduced. Now, here's what's really interesting. We've got 2 words here in the Hebrew, liberty, jubilee, deror, yovel. When you look at the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Torah and the prophets, it actually uses the same Greek word for both of these Hebrew terms. And the word in the Greek is aphesis. Okay. For those of you who don't know, the Septuagint is believed to have been translated roughly anywhere between 400 to 200 BC. Okay. And so we get a really good understanding from the Septuagint. So we're able to basically back translate words from the Hebrew scriptures to the Greek New Testament. And we can go from the Greek New Testament back into the Hebrew through this translation of the Greek Old Testament, so to speak. And so, for whatever reason, the translators of the Septuagint chose this same Greek word, aphesis, for both liberty and jubilee. Okay? They're equating doror and yovel to the same thing in the Greek. Now, aphesis means a release from bondage or imprisonment. Look at this, the forgiveness or pardon of sins. Whoa, 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 whoa. Where did they get that idea from? Well, we'll get to that. Remission of the penalty. The penalty of what? Do we not read of the remission of sins? Okay, so we have these themes in the Jubilee. Now, what is attached to the Jubilee? Okay, so first we see liberty, this liberation of the captives and a return to property. What does this even mean? What are some of the Torah implications of the Jubilee? Because there are key things that are tied to the understanding of the Jubilee. And again, remember, there's a clear parallel between the counting of the Omer and the counting of Jubilees, okay? So it would behoove us to understand the Jubilee a little bit better. Let's look at the idea of redemption of land and property, okay? In Leviticus 25, same chapter. So when you read Leviticus 25, there's the Jubilee and everything associated with it. The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, says Yah. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. Interesting. Yah's telling us that earth is not our home. Right there. We're strangers and sojourners on the earth. This should be giving echoes of Hebrews, which we'll get to next week. In all the country you possess, you shall allow a redemption of the land. If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his brother has sold. And so what would happen in the Torah is that if you became too poor and you became indebted, you were able to sell your property and basically pay off the debt. Now, the problem with that is that you would lose your property. Now, what Yah is saying is when you sell your property, you always allow redemption of this property. And when you sold your property, the value was reckoned according to how many years to the Jubilee there was. Because we've just read in the Jubilee that whatever land you would have sold, you would return to. So you were able to sell property knowing that you would receive it back at the Jubilee. However, if you wanted to redeem it ahead of the Jubilee, you were able to do so. But there were clear rules. Either you redeemed it yourself or your kinsmen, those of your family, could redeem it. Now, the word for redeem, the verb form here, this redemption, is the word ga'al. This is what it means to redeem, to be... Now, from the word Ga'al comes the word Goel, the redeemer, the one who is able to redeem. Note what the Torah says. For someone to be a redeemer, he has to be part of your family. He has to share your flesh and blood. Interesting. So, to use an example, let's say I sold my property. Curtis would not be able to redeem my property because he's not part of my physical family. It would have to be someone of my physical family that would be able to act as kinsman redeemer, as we understand it. Okay? So there's clear rules regarding redemption. Someone in the family has to redeem, and it has to be your nearest kinsman. You see this in the book of Ruth. Okay? And so this is the redemption of property, land. This meant that a tribal inheritance could never be lost within the tribe, okay? Yes, it could be sold off, but it would always remain within the tribe. Now, think of what we've been covering in this series. The suffering servant becoming the seed of man. That there's an inheritance attached to the covenant of Abraham, is there not? Your seed shall possess the land. Okay. Now, does the house of Israel currently, all 12 tribes, reside in that promised inheritance? No, it does not. A redemption of land has to occur. Do you see what's going on here? Let's keep going. People could be redeemed according to Torah. And again, this was intrinsically tied to the Jubilee and the Shemitah cycles. If a stranger or sojourner with you becomes rich, and your brother, so someone of the house, besides him, becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you, or to a member of the stranger's clan, then after he is sold, he may be redeemed. Again, so it uses the Hebrew word geulah, which comes from Gaal. A better English translation would be that after he is sold, a right of redemption remains, okay? Again, one of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle or his cousin may redeem him, or a close relative from his clan may redeem him. If he look at this though, if he grows rich, if for whatever reason, though he sold himself into servitude, he happens to become financially wealthy, he may redeem himself. And so the Torah is giving clear statements. If you are sold into bondage and servitude, you have two choices. Either you redeem yourself, if you can, or one of your kin can redeem you. And again, the value of redemption was tied to how many years to the Jubilee was left, okay? Or if you couldn't redeem yourself or your brother couldn't redeem you, well then, good luck. You waited until the Jubilee, essentially. Good luck. You're a bondservant now. Again, this word, Gaal, is this thing of redemption and all the words associated with it. So Gaal means to redeem. The Goel is the redeemer, okay? The kinsman redeemer. And the Geulah is the right of redemption. And Yah says there's always this right of redemption. What other role did the Redeemer, the Goel, have as per Torah? We read it in English as the avenger of blood, okay? We have two English terms, the kinsman redeemer and the avenger of blood. In the Hebrew, it was the same word, the Goel, okay? Numbers 35, verses 10 onwards. Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select cities to be cities of refuge for you. That the manslayer, someone who committed manslaughter, basically, who kills any person without intent, it's an accident, okay? He may flee there. So this is not murder. This is accidental manslaughter. There's a key difference here. The cities shall be for you a refuge from the avenger. The word there is the Goel, okay? So again, let's say I was manslaughtered. Curtis would not be able to be my avenger because he's not part of my clan. He's not part of my kin, of my family. It had to be someone in the family that could either redeem you or avenge your blood, okay? That the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation for judgment. Think of the judgment seat of Messiah overtones here. But again, if you understand the rules of redemption, the rules of the Goel, you would understand that someone of the family has to be the redeemer, or the kinsman redeemer, or the avenger of blood. Okay? It continues. But if he struck him down with an iron object so that he died, he is a murderer. The passage goes on to describe what the differences are between manslaughter and between murder, okay? The murderer shall be put to death. The avenger of blood shall himself put the murderer to death. When he meets him, he shall put him to death. Here, it uses the term goel hadam. Now, dam means blood, so it's giving you further detail here. The avenger of blood, the redeemer of blood. Now, the Torah is very clear that only someone of kin is able to avenge the murderer, okay, is able to avenge their kin's blood. And so there's clear rules and regulations regarding redemption. Remember that Ga'al, it means to redeem or to avenge, okay? And there's clear Torah principles as to who can do it and who cannot, okay? Whoops. Moreover, you shall accept no ransom for the life of a murderer who is guilty of death, but he shall be put to death, okay? It's telling you if someone's guilty of murder, that's it. There's no intercession for them. There's no fleeing to a city of refuge. In fact, it says if a murderer goes to a city of refuge and you find out he's actually a murderer, you throw him out and you hand him over to the avenger. Hand him over. Now, here's what's really interesting. The word for ransom here is kofer. Kofer comes from the word kafar, which means to cover, to purge, to make an atonement. This is actually priestly language as well. It's saying you do not cover over the sin of murder. You hand it over to be avenged. Look at this. You shall accept no ransom, no atonement, no covering for him who has fled to his city of refuge, that he may return to dwell in the land before the death of the high priest. So what the Torah is saying is, if someone's a murderer, you do not cover their sin. You hand them over. But if you have someone guilty of manslaughter, you do not hand them over. If they're in the city of refuge, you leave them alone. Okay? Why? You shall not pollute the land in which you live, for blood pollutes the land, and no atonement can be made for the land. The same word again, kafar, no atonement. So can you see this language regarding the avenging of blood is closely related to the word for atonement or purging of sin? How do you atone for the land? Except by the blood of the one who shed it. And so this is why there's strict rules and regulations regarding murder and manslaughter, because if not, you actually defile the land itself, okay? I actually believe this is part of the reason for the need for the treading of the winepress, okay? Blood will be spilt. Why? To purify the land of the murderers for the blood that was shed upon it. Whole other topic. Okay, this is what the Torah has to say. What are the greater implications of these things? Because the prophets and the writings speak a lot on these things. In Psalm 49, verses 7 through to 9, truly no man can ransom another or give to Elohim the price of his life. The word for price of his life here is the word kofer, which is from the word kafar, atonement. It's saying that man cannot pay the atonement for his life. He cannot. And this word for the price of his life is being equated to the word for ransom. Now, this is a different word here in the Hebrew. It's the word padah, which means to ransom, but it also means to redeem. When you study this word padah, when you study it out, it's synonymous with the word kafar, to atone for, but also for the word ga'al, to redeem. Okay? And so what King David is saying is, man cannot redeem himself. Man cannot atone for himself. Why? For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice. That he should live on forever and never see the pit. Okay? So what King David is saying is, we cannot redeem ourselves from sin and death. Why? Because we're in bondage to it. Okay? So we see in the Torah, in the shadow picture, you could redeem yourself from servitude, from bond servitude or slavery, or your kinsman could do it. Well, King David is saying, at the deeper level, we cannot redeem ourselves from death. We're in bondage to it. Why? We're fallen. This means it's going to take someone that is greater than us to redeem us from death. Do you see what's being said here? We can't pay it, so who can? Good question. Redeemed from death. Bless Yah, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives your iniquity, your sins, who heals all your diseases. Look at this. Who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you. This is bridal language, with steadfast love and mercy. The word here is ga'al, redeem. This is the same word used of what was used regarding the Jubilee, redemption from bond servitude, and the redemption of land. And so now we've got three words all being linked together. The word ga'al, and these words that we've just read, kofer and pada. Okay, redemption, ransoming, atonement, purging of sin. David is saying, you can't redeem yourself from sin and death. You cannot. The price is too high. You do not have the means by which to do it. But he also says that Yah can. Yah can do it. Here's the problem. Who can see the problem here? The Torah gives strict rules as to who can redeem you. Someone of your kin. Last time I checked, I'm a fallen man. An Elohim is an Elohim. Am I an Elohim? No, I'm not. Is Elohim a fallen man? Ooh. I'll let those words hang, so to speak. In Psalm 71:23, my lips will shout for joy. That sounds like Yom Teruah language, Feast of Trumpets. Now, if you understand the fulfillment of the fall appointed times, you'll know that Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Shouting, is linked to the resurrection. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praises to you, my soul also, which you have redeemed. Interesting. Again, it's saying that Yah will redeem our souls. But again, as per Torah, how can he do that? Because he's not of the seed of men. Or have we seen something throughout this series thus far? Redeemed from iniquity. Psalm 130, verses 7 and 8. O Israel, hope in Yah, for with Yah there is steadfast love, and with him there is plentiful redemption. The word there is pedut, so the word for ransom, actually. What's really interesting is when you look at this word pedut and its verb, pada, you know when the census was given in Torah regarding the house of Israel, and it said that a ransom had to be paid to the tabernacle. is this word, padah. You shall ransom, you shall pay a ransom. And this ransom is directly tied to the census of the house of Israel. People may be now seeing a foreshadowing of a heavenly census, a redemption, a ransoming of the house of Israel. And he will redeem Israel from all his iniquities. But again, riddle me this. How does Yah become part of the seed of man? Well, we kind of gave the answer away last week, didn't we? The suffering servant will take on the seed of men and bear the iniquities of many. Do you see? The reason what I'm trying to connect is that the redemption of the soul, the redemption of sin, the redemption is actually Jubilee language. And this is something that is vastly overlooked. This is Jubilee language. You haven't been forgiven in the Western understanding. You've been set free. You've been liberated from sin and death. There has been a liberator, a kinsman redeemer, and are people understanding this? Redeemer of Israel. Isaiah 44, remember these things, O Yaakov and Israel, for you are my servant. I formed you. You are my servant, O Yisrael. You will not be forgotten by me. I have blotted out your transgressions like a cloud and your sins like mist. Return to me, repent, for I have redeemed you. Again, this is the word used of kinsman redeemer. But the deeper connotation is being redeemed from death. And remember that the Apostle Paul would say that the wages of sin are death. King David is saying, you cannot redeem yourself from death. It is stronger than you. You do not have the means, but Yah has. Here's the thing, Yah has to play by his playbook. For Yah to redeem himself, for Yah to redeem you, he has to be part of the family, so to speak. Didn't we read that the suffering servant will proclaim something to his brothers? Oh, interesting. How will the suffering servant intercede for many? How will he bear their iniquities? Sing, O heavens, for Yah has done it. Again, look at this. Shout, O depths of the earth. This is Yom Teruah language. So now the redemption from death, the redemption from sin is being tied to Yom Teruah, the day of trumpets, the resurrection. Break forth into singing, O mountains, O forest, and every tree that is in it. For Yah has redeemed Jacob and will be glorified in Israel. See, in the English, you just read redeemed. In a Hebrew understanding, it's saying that Yah has become your kinsman redeemer. For that to be biblically accurate, Yah has to become your kinsman. Yah will become Yeshua unto me. Thus says Yah, your redeemer, your Goel. He is fulfilling. Now again, look, it's saying that Yah is the kinsman redeemer, who we told in the end of the book is our redeemer, who formed you from the womb. I am Yah, who made all things, who alone stretched out the heavens, who spread out the earth by myself. And we've seen so far that Yah's wondrous deeds have been linked to the stars of heaven, right? Now redemption is being linked to the stars of heaven. Do you think that Yah redeeming our souls from sin and death is a wondrous work? How is he able to do it? Well, he has to become your kinsman redeemer. And this is, again, we're just in the Torah and the prophets and the writings here. And the reason I'm laboring the Torah, prophets, and writings is because what writings did the early assemblies have? Because they did not have a New Testament. They only had what we would call the Old Testament to form their doctrine. Redeemer of Israel, Jeremiah 31. Hear the word of Yah, O nations, declare it in the coastlands far away. Where was the house of Israel scattered to? To all nations, to the coastlands far away. Say, he who scattered Israel will gather him and will keep him as a shepherd keeps his flock. We saw that this was part of the good news, okay, the gospel. Look at this. For Yah has ransomed Jacob and has redeemed him. Look at this. From hands too strong for him. This is why King David would say, who can pay the price of the redemption from Sheol, from the redemption of sin and death? Man cannot do it because Sheol's hands over us are stronger than us because we're subject to it. But Yah is saying, I will do it. I will redeem you. I will be your kinsman redeemer. We saw that the role of the Goel is twofold. Not only is it the redeemer of people and the redeemer of property, now, but it's also the avenging of blood. Do the prophets have something to say on this? Oh, you bet. Deuteronomy 32, this is the song of Moses. For I lift up my hand to heaven and swear, this is Yah speaking, as I live forever, if I sharpen my flashing sword and my hand takes hold on judgment, I will take vengeance on my adversaries and will repay those who hate me. This is Jubilee language, taking vengeance. This is avenger of blood language. Now, the word here is different. It's the word nakam, to avenge, to take vengeance, to revenge, to punish. Didn't we read that as part of the good news that Yah will come with judgment and recompense? Recompense, again, can be both positive and negative. Those who are righteous will have their recompense, their reward. Those who are found wanting will experience the negative aspects of recompense and judgment. But how can Yah avenge his people? Because the Torah gives clear rules, does it not? You have to be part of the kin to avenge yourself of those of your house. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, with the blood of the slain and the captives from the long-haired heads of the enemy. Rejoice with him, O heavens. Again, the heavens being brought in. Bow down to him, all gods, for he avenges, look at this, the blood of his children. This is avenger of blood language. Why? Because this is why if you how do you purify the land as per Torah? The land is atoned for by the spilling of the blood of the murderer, of the ones who shed innocent blood. What does it say of Mystery Babylon? That in her was found the blood of the saints. Does it not? Who is it that avenges the blood of the saints in the book of Revelation? It's the word of Yah. Think of the treading of the winepress. Yah will become Yeshua unto me. I believe this is the answer to the riddle. How can Yah and Elohim be the kinsman redeemer and the avenger of blood of the fallen house of Israel? Unless, let's keep going. But look at this. He avenges the blood of his children. and takes vengeance on his adversaries. He repays those who hate him. And look at this, cleanses his people's land. Why? Because innocent blood was spilt on it. Now think of the covenant with Abraham. To your seed, I will give this land. The land has to be atoned for. The land has to be atoned for. And didn't we read that the suffering servant, through his suffering, would see a seed? Look at this. He avenges the blood of what? His children, his seed. This is all covenant language. The Jubilee and vengeance. See, we've seen how redemption is associated with the Jubilee, but the prophets actually link vengeance to it. Remember that the role of the Goel, the Redeemer, was kinsman redemption, but also avengement. Whoops. Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Master Yah is upon me. This is the servant here. Because Yah has anointed me, look at this, to bring good news to the poor, to bring the gospel, which we covered last week. Yeshua said he fulfilled this, right? He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted. Look at this, to proclaim liberty to the captives. The word here, liberty, in the Hebrew is doror. This is the same word that we saw back in Leviticus 25 when it says, you shall proclaim liberty. Okay? Isaiah 61 is giving you the deeper understanding of what was in Leviticus 25. We're speaking of a liberty from what? The opening of the prison to those who are bound. We saw that this is resurrection language. That what are we being redeemed from? From sin and death. And that was just in the Psalms and the prophets that we saw that. Where were the writers of the Brit getting their doctrine from? And again, we see this word again, doror. The Greek equivalent is the word aphesis. Aphesis. Now, in Leviticus, it equated liberty to jubilee. Okay? To make the point really clear, to proclaim the year of Yah's favor. If that doesn't scream jubilee, I don't know what does. What is the year of Yah's favor? It's the Jubilee. Why? Because Yah instituted back in the Torah, you are sojourners with me, and the land is mine. By my favor, by my grace, when you sell your land, I will make sure that your tribe does not lose it forever. I will allow a right of redemption for it forever. But when it comes to sin and death, he has to be the one that does it. We need a kinsman redeemer to set us free from death, to set us free from the prison of Sheol, to proclaim the year of Yah's favor. And look at this, the day of vengeance. This is the word here that Yah says, I will have my vengeance. I will avenge my children. Look at this, to comfort all who mourn. When Yeshua quoted this in Luke chapter 4, he stopped at the proclaiming the year of Yah's favor, because that was to do with the spring feasts. That was to do with paying the price for redemption. Kinsman redeemer. He paid the price so that he could redeem us from death. But when he comes the second time to fulfill the full appointed times, what do we see? We see the day of vengeance. We see him fulfilling the avenger of blood. So we see the spring feasts to do with suffering servant, which is to do with the price of redemption from death. Fall appointed times, we see avenger of blood. And the resurrection, why? Because the price is already being paid. Are people seeing how all this is coming together and how Whenever you see redemption, forgiveness, atonement, this is all Jubilee language. It's actually a Jubilee. Isaiah 63. Why is your apparel red and your garments like his who treads the winepress? Where else do we see the treading of the winepress? We see it in Revelation, and that it's Messiah that treads this winepress. I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. I trod them in my anger and trampled them in my wrath. Again, this is full appointed times language. Their lifeblood spattered on my garments and stained all my apparel. Look at this. For the day of vengeance is in my heart. Well, we've just seen that that's tied to the Jubilee. And the year of my redeemed has come. We see that this is, again, the redemption, Gaal. This is Jubilee language. So we see that the Jubilee takes on two roles: redemption of sin and the avenging of blood. And we also see a redemption of land, okay? All associated with the role of the Goel, the Redeemer, the Avenger. But again, the Avenger has to be part of the family, as per Torah. How can Elohim fulfill the role of the Redeemer and the Avenger? Because Elohim is Elohim. We're fallen men. Now, we already made some bold proclamations last teaching that Yah will become Yeshua unto me, the suffering servant who will regather the exiles and regather the house of Israel will take on the seed of man. In John chapter 1, we see this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. He was in the beginning with Elohim. Think Bereshit, in the beginning. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything that was made. It's giving deity status to Messiah. And look at this. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory. Glory is of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. We see Messiah taking on the seed of man. Clearly, this is part of the good news. And this is not a New Testament concept. We saw it in the book of Psalms and in the book of Isaiah. Clearly, that Elohim would put on flesh. This is how Yah can fulfill kinsman redeemer and avenger of blood and not break Torah. That's good news. And this is what needs to be proclaimed. Hebrews chapter 2. This is speaking of Messiah. For it was fitting that he, look at this, for whom and by whom all things exist. It's assigning creator status to Messiah. Creator. In bringing many sons to glory. Who are these sons? The suffering servant would see a seed. He would proclaim the name of Yah to who? His brothers. This is kinsman language. He should make the founder of their salvation perfect through suffering. For he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified are all of one. That is why, look at this, he is not ashamed to call them brothers. He's part of the clan. Technically, we're part of his clan. But this is how the laws of kinsman redemption and avenger of blood have been upheld. The word put on flesh. Saying, I will, so he's quoting a verse here. I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I will sing your praise. This is a quote from Psalm 22, which when you read Psalm 22, it prophesies in great detail of the crucifixion, right? And people stopped there, but then we read on and we saw that actually the one who's suffering will proclaim these things, and that this was tied to the good news and to Yah becoming Yeshua unto us. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children Elohim has given me. Hebrews is quoting passages that we've read earlier in the series to make the point. Hebrews, people miss this, but Hebrews is actually speaking Jubilee. Messiah is the one that will fulfill the Jubilee, the grand eschatological Jubilee. Now, he's quoting Isaiah 8 here in verses 13. So what does Isaiah 8 have to say? The rock of stumbling. Didn't we read of this last week? The rock of stumbling? And that the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected will become the chief cornerstone. And that was linked to the wondrous works of Yah. And it was linked to proclaiming that Yah will become Yeshua unto me. Let's see what Isaiah 8 says. Yah of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear. Let him be your dread. He will become a sanctuary and a stone of offense, and a rock of stumbling to both houses of Israel, and a trap and a snare, look at this, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Didn't we read of the suffering servant that the nation will abhor him? Well, who was that nation? Those that were in Jerusalem. Isaiah is telling you the same thing. Isaiah is also telling you who the rock of offense is, who the stone of stumbling is. It's saying it's Yah. King David said that was Yah becoming Yeshua unto me. That would be rejected, but that would then become the chief cornerstone. Again, that the suffering servant would seemingly fail, but be exalted. Many shall stumble on it. Many. They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared and taken. This is those in the house. Bind up the testimony. Look at this. Seal the teaching among my disciples. The word there for teaching, by the way, is Torah. There's an allusion here to bind up the testimony, seal the teaching, that it actually becomes covered. What are we told of? That those who praise his name but keep their hearts far from him, it's like they read a book and they can't understand it. I will wait for Yah. Look at this, who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob. And I will hope in him. Behold, I and the children whom Yah has given me are signs and portents in Israel from Yah of hosts, who dwells on Mount Zion. Let me explain this prophecy to you. It's who is the rock of offense? Yah becoming Yeshua. Did Yeshua have some disciples? Yes. And he says, I and the children, these disciples that's been given to him from Yah, they are for signs and portents. Portents is like an omen, a warning. Okay? And he's saying that these disciples are for signs and warnings in the house of Israel from Yah of hosts. Well, what did the disciples go on to proclaim after the completion of the counting of the Omer and Shavuot? Repent, for the kingdom of Yah is at hand. This man, Yeshua, who you put to death, is the promise to Abraham and to King David. He is the promise of redemption, and you put him to death. Do you see what's going on? It's all there in the prophets. The disciples did not have new doctrine. They had a witness and a deeper understanding of what was already given to them. This is why when they're walking with Yeshua on the road to Emmaus and they didn't recognize him, what does it say? That Yeshua opened up their understanding to the scriptures. There's no New Testament when that statement is being made. It's the same good news. Always has been. The only thing that's changed is how much of it we understand. Again, Psalm 118. I thank you that you have answered me and have become my salvation. Vathili li shua. It literally says, and you will become Yeshua to me. The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone upon which the whole faith is founded upon. This is Yah's doing. It is wonderful, marvelous in our eyes. When you couple these two scriptures, Psalm 118 and Isaiah 8 that we've just read, it says that Yah will become the stone of offense and stone of stumbling. This was already prophesied of by King David. This is the day that Yah has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Hoshiana, Hosanna, save us. Bring it about that we will be saved. How? Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yah. We bless you from the house of Yah. This is all Jubilee language. This is all possible through the fulfillment of the Jubilee. This is why Yeshua had to come in the flesh so that the Jubilee could be enacted. This is why John would say, test every spirit, because every spirit that says Yeshua has not come in the flesh, big problems. If you're saying Messiah did not come in the seed of man, you're saying that the plan of redemption, the Jubilee, was not fulfilled. It's dangerous territory. Hebrews 2, continuing, since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things. The writer of Hebrews, who I believe was Paul, he's got the Jubilee in the back of his mind when he's writing this. Because later on, we'll see this in next week's teaching, the book of Hebrews is clearly speaking Jubilee language. This is why he had to partake of flesh and blood, that through death, he might destroy the one who has power of death, that is the devil. And look at this, to deliver all those who through fear of death, look at this, were subject to lifelong slavery. The liberation of the captives. This is Jubilee language. This is why this deliverance from death and lifelong slavery comes right after Messiah putting on flesh. Why? Because for Yah to not break the Torah regarding Jubilee, he had to come in the flesh. Look at this. For surely it is not angels that he helps. But look at this. He helps the seed of Abraham. We're right back at the covenant with Abraham. Right back. Paul is saying, for the covenant to be fulfilled, the Jubilee has to be fulfilled. Oh, look, his name is Yeshua. His name is Wonder. He has become Yeshua unto me. He did not break the Torah. And so, I'm going to leave this passage as a seed for next week, because next week we're definitely going to look at what the writers of the Brit had to say. Matthew 26. And Yeshua took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them and said, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the renewed covenant, which is poured out for the forgiveness of sins. The word there for forgiveness in the Greek is the word aphesis. This is the same word that was used in the Torah for the Jubilee and for the liberation. Proclaim freedom at the 50th year. This is the same word used in Isaiah to proclaim the acceptable year of Yah's favor, to proclaim release, forgiveness to those who are bound. What is it that we've been redeemed from, that we could not redeem ourselves from? The word forgiveness in the English is very misleading. Yeshua is essentially saying, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for the Jubilee. Oh, do you see what's being said? This is powerful. The forgiveness of sins and the penalty thereof is a Jubilee concept. It's not this Western wishy-washy, oh, I've been forgiven. No, you've been liberated. You've been set free from the power of Sheol. How? I read of someone who died and rose again and has the keys to Sheol. Thus, he is able to enact the cosmic Jubilee. In the next part, we're going to look at why is Yeshua's blood required for the forgiveness of sins. Because again, we understand the what, but we don't understand the why. Why was his blood required for the Jubilee of sins? What does Yeshua coming in the flesh have to do with the Jubilee? Hopefully you're beginning to see the connections as to why that is. What does this have to do with inheritance? Because remember, we've seen thus far the suffering servant is the firstborn. He has a double portion inheritance that he shares with his brothers. We also see with the Jubilee that there's a redemption of land. Well, there's a land promised to Abraham. How does all this tie in with the covenant that Yah made with Abraham? And how did the writers of the Brit Chadashah view all of this in terms of the plan of redemption? I hope people are starting to get excited, and so we should. Because a proclamation is to go forth. What is it that we are recounting? What is it that we are proclaiming? Safar. What is the good news? Anyway, let's stop here. Amen.